Magic the Gathering, a terrifying game. If you think you're brave enough, come along and play Friday Night Magic on a Sunday. Hi, hello, I'm Eva. Today we're playing a Pauper tournament. If you don't know what Pauper is, it's a 60-card format where you can play only with common cards. So, Vivi can't break this format. Not yet anyway, not until it becomes a common somehow. Today we're playing one of the most scary Pauper decks, Mono Black Devotion. Ow. It's not a powerful deck, it's not scary because it's powerful. It's scary because, you know, that's the theme. I do love jank, and I love Mono Black, so I had to try it and see what happens. You're brave enough to abandon rares and play Magic's most evil color, come along. Otherwise, the like button is down there. Press it before you leave. I haven't really played this deck. I've taken some practice hands, but once again, I'm just going to a tournament to see what happens. You saw my starting hand, and I start with a Blood Fountain, creating a Blood token, and my opponent's playing Tron. Alright, this is gonna be a rough first match. But I get to play Combat Witches. 2 black mana for a 1/3 that can tap to deal 1 damage to anything, but then your opponent also deals 1 damage to anything. My opponent plays a Prophetic Prism, which allows them to draw a card when it enters. It can also filter 1 mana into 1 mana of any color, which is really good for Tron. They want these 3 lands into play. Together they tap the 7 colorless, so you need the Prophetic Prism to turn that colorless into colored. I play Mephetic, whatever this is. When it enters, I lose 1 life and draw a card, and when it dies, I also draw a card and lose 1 life. Then I attack for 1 with my witches. My opponent have all 3 Tron lands without having to look for any of them. We call this Natural Tron, and we complain about it. They play an Energy Refractor, which can filter more mana from them. My opponent has all the mana they need, and since all the spells they cast replaces themselves with a new card, they also still have a lot of cards in hand, even after a mulligan to 5. I swing for 1 and play a Chittering Rat, a 2/2 creature that costs 2 black and 1, and when it enters, the opponent has to take a card from their hand and put on top of their library. My opponent in my end step plays a Mystical Teachings. To find a Mystical Teachings, this confuses me. Why do you tutor for the same tutor? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. My opponent said he wasn't entirely sure either. He plays a Lauren Revealed and draws another 3 cards. He has all the mana and a stacked hand, and I'm applying pressure with a 1/3 and a 2/2, so I'm worried that something's gonna happen soon and I can't kill my opponent in time with these tiny weird little creatures. And now my opponent says welcome to Pauper's newest all-star, Kyrogen Relic! This 2 mana artifact doesn't just draw a card when it enters, but when it leaves the battlefield. Not when it goes to the graveyard, when it leaves, so you can blink it or return it to your hand, rather than sacrifice it to draw more cards. I attack for 3. What I need now is a way to draw more cards. I only have the pressure of 3 damage a turn, and I need more pressure to win this game before my opponent does something wild. So I start using my blood tokens to discard cards and draw new cards. Since my opponent isn't putting any threats on the board, I have no need for my cast down and hope to get something better. Sadly, I don't really, so it's another Blood Fountain with another blood token. We sacrifice that blood token too to draw more cards. Spending this whole time cycling my hand is really bad because what I want right now is to close the game before my opponent can do something to win. Putting creatures and removal into my card to find lands to put more pressure on is not great for me. My opponent proceeds to play a Murmuring Mystic, a 1/5 for 4 mana that whenever you play an instant or sorcery creates a 1/1 flying bird token. This is not great for stopping me actually. The Combat Witch can shoot the tokens 1 by 1. I did just discard a cast down, so my opponent probably thinks his creature is safe. If he starts making 1/1 birds, I can just pick them off with my Combat Witch. It does, however, stop me from attacking since it's a big enough blocker to stop my rat, and I only have 2 creatures. My opponent uses their massive wealth of mana to play another Lauren Reel, drawing 3 cards and making 1 bird. This is bad for me, but on the other hand, they're still not really defending themselves that well from me, so I might have a way to win this game. If they'd been able to make more birds this turn by casting more instant sorceries, I would have had a problem because I would have to spend a lot of turns picking off birds with my witch. My opponent then plays another energy refractor. We're both just kind of playing a lot of permanents that don't put a whole lot of pressure on the board. I'm not sure how this specific Tron deck wins, I haven't seen it before, but on my turn I instantly kill the Murmuring Mystic. I had a second cast down. My witch takes care of the bird and I lose 1 life, making the life counters in the top accurate now. I don't know why they were wrong. Editing is really hard. However, now it's an open way for my rat to do 2 damage. Someone hit the camera. After the match I talked with my opponents, the first time they're piloting Tron, so they're probably as confused as I am about what they're doing, but I can imagine they're also very confused about what my deck is doing. I play a Refurbished Familiar, a 4 mana 2/1 flyer that makes the opponent discard when it enters, but it has affinity for artifacts, so I can cast it for just 1 mana. Also, it's a flyer, so if they play a block, I can still get over it. My opponent's considering their options. They don't have any threats on board and they need something to play, so they play a Pulse of Murasa, which gains 6 life and returns a creature card from their graveyard to their hand, so they can recast the Murmuring Mystic and start making 1/1s. My opponent then also plays another Chirogenic Relic and an Expedition map which can find lands. I'm suspecting what they want to do is find a Ghostly Flicker they can cast over and over along with something that brings it back from the graveyard. But they have neither the Ghostly Flicker or something that can bring it back, it seems. And they don't make any 1/1 tokens off of playing artifacts. So I'm okay for now. You may be wondering why I'm playing these creatures like witches and chittering rats when they're not very good at what they do. And they don't hit very hard. But they do cost black mana when we cast Grain Merchant of Asphodel. When this enters, each opponent loses life equal to the amount of black mana symbols on all my cards, which in this case is 10 life, and I gain that much. And then I attack for 5, my opponent blocks 2 of that damage. Between the attack and the Grain Merchant of Asphodel, we've put them down to 6. And I have another Gary in hand. That's what we call the Grey Merchant. Tron can have a lot of win conditions. My opponent plays Mystian Elder. I've never heard of this card before today. It's a 1/3 for 3 that creates a 0/1 wizard when it comes into play. That wizard deals 1 damage every time you play a non-creature spell. Then they play a Chirurgeon Relic, and because they play that, they draw a card, but also the wizard deals 1 damage to me. And now I realize how this Tron deck wins. It's going to blink that wizard, create more wizards, and kill me with a lot of wizards and a lot of damage, so I have to kill them before they do that. But I did gain 10 life off of the Grey Merchant of Asphodel, so it's gonna be a while before I'm dead anyway. They cast Wall. I can't pronounce it. It's a 0/4 wall for 5 mana, but it brings back an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and they bring back the Pulse of Murasa. They do need to find healing, because if I have another Grey Merchant of Asphodel, it'll do 12 damage. But even this isn't enough. They need to gain more than this in case I have a second merchant, which I do. They play an Expedition map, I take 1 damage, and then they play Weather the Storm. They've played 4 spells on their turn, so they gain 15 life going to 21. Well, we have to get started on the work, so we play a second Grey Merchant of Asphodel, dealing 12 damage and gaining 12 life. However, between the Murmuring Mystic making birds and it being a 1/5, getting in for any more damage is going to be extremely difficult at this point. My only hope is that 38 life buys me enough time to find more Grey Merchants to kill with. Here I attack for 6. My hope is that my creatures will die so I can bring them back with the Blood Fountain. If you tap, sacrifice and play 4 mana, Blood Fountain can bring 2 creatures back from your graveyard to your hand. So if I can get a merchant into my graveyard, I can then return it and replay it. I also want my Refurbished Familiar in the graveyard, as it would be very cheap to cast it again. They block everything, but they only kill the Refurbished Familiar. Also, I would need 4 mana to bring anything back, and then 5 mana to play the Grey Merchant of Asphodel, so it's still a play over 2 turns, but I don't really see another way forward here. Another good thing about Refurbished Familiar dying is now I can use my Kumbhaji Witches. It turns out if you have both of these in play, tapping the Combat Witch just kills your own refurbished familiar. Here I get to kill the wizard that deals damage to me, and they shoot me. Now here I make my first obvious play mistake. My opponent simply passes the turn, and I draw an Eviscerator's Insight, which can sacrifice a creature or an artifact to draw 2 cards. I use it on my Mispheric Draught thingy to lose another life and draw 3 cards, but if I use it on Grey Merchant of Asphodel, I could bring it back to my hand and kill my opponent next turn. In my mind, I wanted to draw more cards, so I had a bigger chance of drawing Grey Merchant of Asphodel. I then play a Tithing Blade, which is good because all the creatures my opponent have are very powerful. In response, they play a Mystical Teachings, which creates a 1/1 bird, but once the bird's been created, I can shoot it with my Combat Witches, even if I'll take a damage for it, and they still have to sacrifice one of their valuable creatures. At least that was the plan. However, they finally found their big card. They found Ghostly Flicker. It exiles 2 target artifacts, creatures or lands and brings them back right away. My opponent uses this to blink their Mnemonic Wall and their Mistane Elder. When these creatures enter the battlefield, my opponent gets to return an instant or sorcery from the graveyard, which will be the Ghostly Flicker, and create a new 0/1 wizard that deals 1 damage whenever you play a non-creature spell. This isn't a loop, but they have enough mana to do this multiple times a turn, so they can keep bringing the Ghostly Flicker back, keep making wizards, and those wizards will then do more and more damage. I could say if I had brought my Asphodel back the way I wanted to, I maybe would have won, but they could have just brought back Weather the Storm and gained a bunch of life as well, so that wouldn't have been a show and it would have been a different game though. They play Ghostly Flicker again, dealing 1 damage to me from the wizard, making a 1/1 from the Murmuring Mystic, creating a 0/1 from the Mistane Elder, and getting the Ghostly Flicker back in their hand from the Mnemonic Wall. Whew! That's a lot of actions for 1 card. And then they do it again, but this time they have 2 wizards, so they do 2 damage, and next time will be 3, then 4, and I'm down to 33. I have a very limited amount of time to find a kill here. At least they're not gaining life, so I could just top deck the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. But as we said before, they can return spells from their graveyard to their hand, and they return the Pulse of Murasa as well, which will gain them 6 life and put them to 15. And that's out of range of a Grey Merchant of Asphodel because I lost creatures, therefore losing black symbols on my cards, therefore my next Grey Merchant of Asphodel will do less damage. So while playing this match and while watching the footage back, I forgot this, but this is all during my end step. It's about to become his turn, in which he can do it all again. Or he can just pass and do it in my end step and then in his own turn. So I have 1 turn in which they can also do any amount of things. I skipped ahead here, it's my opponent's turn. They've cracked an expedition map to find a land and play another one. That expedition map deals 3 damage to me because of the 3 wizards in play. At the end of my opponent's end step, I play a Reckoner's Bargain, sacrificing a Grey Merchant of Asphodel, gaining 5 life and drawing 2 cards. This puts it into my graveyard so I can return it with the Blood Fountain, which will cost 4 mana, and then next turn I can play it for 5 mana, dealing less than 15 damage. I think this is a very positive mindset I have now, and I'm all for it. Go past Eva. I'm so focused on my plan at this moment, I haven't entirely worked out how dead I am when it's my opponent's turn. So I do crack the Blood Fountain, bring back Grey Merchant of Asphodel and my refurbished familiar to my hand. Then I play Mispheric Draught, losing 1 life, drawing a card. At this point I'm hoping having 31 life is enough to stay alive against my opponent, but as soon as they take their turn, I kind of realize how much mana they have and how much their damage escalate. On my end step, they play the first Ghostly Flicker. It will deal 3 damage, create another wizard, and return the Ghostly Flicker to their hand. They will then do it again. That one will deal 4 damage. The next one 5, 6, and so on. And not only can they do it in my end step, they can do it for their turn as well. That's more than enough, because it's escalating like that to kill me. And I concede. It's game 2, my opponent has 7 cards this time, but so do I, and I have a Duress, and I also have both a Mispheric Draught and a Inviscerator's Insight to draw a bunch of cards, so hopefully I can get 5 mana, and play the Grey Merchant of Asphodel on turn 5 and kill my opponent. I just need some creatures to play in the meantime. I quickly flashed my hand to the camera so I can remember what hand I had, but I've also played a Duress and discarded one of their mana filters, hoping they can't play too many cards without it and they can't draw. It's not a great Duress, but getting cards out of their hand is okay for now. I have another Duress for them, and I discard their other mana fixing, where I think I should have really gone for the Cryogenic Relic and stopped them from having draws constantly in case they have bounce or blink. The good news is my opponents actually have all the Tron lands, so they have to play a Cryogenic Relic to dig for one. They also don't have any expedition maps to find the lands. It's my turn 3 and I haven't developed anything on the board, so I play the Mispheric Draught and lose a life draw card. That also gives me my first black mana symbol to do damage with the Grey Merchant. My opponent plays a land that lets him scry for 1, and I'm considering how do I actually find something to put into play. I do have to sacrifice Mispheric Draught to the Inviscerator's Insight and hope I find some Kumbatya Witches or Chittering Rats at this point. So for my turn, that's what I'll do. I'll play it and sacrifice the Draught, drawing 3 cards off of it. It is kind of nice to play against this Tron deck because it doesn't run a lot of interactions. I'm not getting counterspelled, my creatures aren't being removed, I just have to get through their life gain and damage. I didn't draw anything for 2 mana, so I just have to pass the turn to my opponent. A Kumbatya Witch would have been really good here. My opponent plays an Energy Refractor, which can turn the non-colored mana into colored mana if they need it, but also draws them a card. My problem right now is I have no board developed, and I can actually cast the Grey Merchant of Asphodel next turn, but I'll only do 2 damage. So I really need some cards I can put on the board to make it more threatening and also start whittling their life total down. This is a very slow start. I even lost the Mispheric Draught, which is going to mean a lot here, because this Refurbished Familiar I'm going to cast will cost 3 mana instead of 2, so I can't cast anything else for the turn. It's also interesting, I've discarded 3 cards from my opponent's hand so far, but because every card in their deck says draw a card, I haven't actually really made a dent in their card advantage. Playing a Duress seems almost like a downside for myself right now. My opponent, by drawing so many cards, has already assembled Tron on turn 5 as well, which isn't that irregular, and they get to play the Mnemonic Wall and bring back a Mystical Teaching that I discarded. It doesn't seem like a discard strategy has been the correct choice for my sideboard this game. My opponent also has enough mana to also cast Mistian Elder. I do use a cast down the Mnemonic Wall trying to slow down because it looks like they have all the combo pieces they need if they draw a Ghostly Flicker. And they have a tutor for it in their hand. For my turn, I use a cast down on the Mistian Elder. I'm also realizing now that sideboarding permanents out to get more Duresses in is a problem because I won't have things to actually empower my Grey Merchant of Asphodel. My Refurbished Familiar attacked for 2, and then I put down a Gurmag Angler. This is a 5/5 for 7 mana, but you can discount the colorless mana by exiling 1 card from your graveyard instead. So I exile my entire graveyard to play this Gurmag Angler. I feel I can put more pressure on my opponent. I have a flyer, so now next time I'm heading for 7, and then I can play a Grey Merchant of Asphodel and deal a lot of damage. I did, however, exile a Eviscerator's Insight from my graveyard, which has Flashback, which might bite me in the butt. Gurmag Angler is an interesting card. I'm not sure I would keep it in the deck if I remade it. It only provides 1 black mana symbol for the Devotion, and you don't have an easy way to fill up your graveyard, so you're not guaranteed to play it. I just played Duresses and Removal in this matchup. My opponent plays a Prophetic Prism. It deals 1 damage to me because of the Wizard, and they draw a card off of it. It's kind of a problem for me how fast they can dig so deep. They also trigger the Wizard again and deal damage, and they play another Prophetic Prism, which again, another damage, another card drawn, which is very scary because if they make it deep enough, they will start finding healing, and I will lose the ability to kill them with a Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Next, they play an Impulse, but it's kind of funny because Impulse on this card is worded wrong. It says put all your cards on the bottom and then shuffle. but it's been errated, so you don't have to shuffle. I had to call a judge, and we looked at it and we laughed about it. But I didn't laugh about this next play. My opponent plays a mystical teaching, which allows them to find an instant in the library and put it into their hand. You'll never guess what they find. They find good old Weather the Storm. And they gain 15 life, and I take a damage from a wizard, bringing them to 33 and me to 13. Now, I'm not a quitter, but I do really want to quit, honestly. I attack for 7, bringing them down to 26. And since there's a race on, I do have to play something to try and kill them. So I play a Grey Merchant of Asphodel for the entire sum of 4 damage and gain 4 life. I haven't brought them below their starting health, but at least I'm representing 9 damage on board, and I can draw another Asphodel to do another 6. So it's not like I'm presenting no danger, but not enough. The spells in my opponent's hands are just gonna generate too much value or life at this point. And that's gonna be evident as they play this Pulse of Murasa to return their Mnemonic Wall to their hand. They will gain 6 life off it, going to 28, and I'll take a damage from the wizard, and I'll be down at 16 now. Yeah, that is. Show it to me! Thank you. And the Mnemonic Wall will be able to bring, let's say, the Pulse back, or any spell in their graveyard, really. So I am not just racing a clock anymore, I am racing an engine that can produce life, can return spells from the grave. It can do anything, and it has all the mana in the world to do it. How am I going to pull a win out of this? This isn't one of those close matches that's decided by an intelligent play. My opponent plays an expedition map that deals 1 damage to me. This is more one of those games where, you know, I wonder if my deck is powerful enough to do things in this tournament. And it's this first match. I attack for 9, but my opponent has the walls. They can block the Grey Merchant of Asphodel and only take 7, going down to 21. Still not below their starting health. So I don't know if this is a bad matchup or what my good matchups look like. I consider playing my Viscerer's Insight from the graveyard, but realize, you know, it's been exiled because I played the Gurmag Angler. I also have already started thinking, how have I built this deck wrong? There are some things I can see. I play the Refurbished Familiar, my opponent discards a card, but it's probably too late for me to get back in this game. They discard the Pulse of Murasa, realizing they don't actually need any more life gain. They can kill me very quickly now. They cast the Ghostly Flicker before it's their turn, flickering the wall and the artifact, the Chirogenic Relic. That means they draw 2 cards and can return the flicker from their graveyard to the hand. And I take 1 damage from the wizard they have in play. All they need now is the Elder, so they can make more wizards and kill me very quickly. When I went into today's tournament, I knew I was playing a deck that probably wasn't the most powerful. But this game did make me question, is there something wrong with this deck? And I think between the Gurmag Anglers and playing Kumbaji Witches together with Refurbished Familiar, there's definitely some flaws in the deck construction at this point. But that's okay, I really like playing all these cards together, and I didn't come today to like try and win. That'll come next time. And just as I hear recording start sounding, let's say, less than positive, the playing version of me kind of realizes, well, they have it all. They can draw all the cards, they can get the Ghostly Flicker back, and I take damage every time. And this is when I choose to concede. There it is. That's the guy who makes wizards, and I realize I am dead as fuck. I'm not allowed to say fuck on YouTube, I think. But I'm looking forward to my next match, because I just want to drop some Garys on the field and see my opponent's expressions. That's what the plan is. Look at my little legs wobbling. This is what I used to record. So when you see the footage go, it's because someone walked into it. You put your phone up here for the next match, the thing holding the phone. I don't know, it didn't lose power. It just suddenly decided, hey, what if I filmed the floor instead? I don't have footage for the next match. I lost. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you watch this far. This is a long ass video. And it's game 3. We're up against the Titan of Pauper, Dredge. It's been around as long as I can remember, which is about this, 2 months I've been playing Pauper. But anyway, I've played a Blood Fountain, adding 1 black mana symbol to my devotion, and my opponent has just played a land and found another one by discarding a Generous End. And that's Exhume! Now it's a Generous End. Exhume is a 2-mana sorcery that lets each player return a creature from their graveyard to the battlefield. But I don't have a creature in my graveyard, and they got a big 5/6 Generous End into their graveyard by discarding it with Forest Cycling. Luckily I had a Tithing Blade, so I could kill the End right away. Then my opponent plays the Stinkweed Imp. Stinkweed Imp is a 1/2 flyer with Death Touch, but that's not the important part. The important is it has Dredge 5, which means if it's in your graveyard and you would draw a card, you can instead return it to your hand and put 5 cards from the top of your deck into your graveyard. And this is a broken mechanic. Luckily they can't use it because the Imp is on the battlefield. I've played a Refurbished Familiar, my opponent has discarded a card, and I discard a card to draw a card with my Blood token. The reason Stinkweed Imp's Dredge ability is so good is because it helps you fill up your graveyard for only the cost of then not having a draw that turn. But if you can use your graveyard, that draw miss doesn't matter because you have resources from your graveyard. My opponent cycles a Khazad-dûm Troll, which lets them find a swarm and put into their hand. And then you know what they do. They play another Exhume and put that troll into play. I still don't have a creature in my graveyard. So even though it's, an effect that affects both players, this doesn't really affect me. Cards with symmetrical effects are fair. Then I play another Refurbished Familiar for a single mana because of all the artifacts I have in play, and my opponent has to discard the last card in their hand. Currently, what's keeping me in the game is, well, 1, they don't have anything, and 2, that Stinkweed Imp can't fill their graveyard up, so they can't actually do what Dredge does at Dredge. They attack me for 6 and then play a Maya Triton. It puts the top 2 cards of the library into their graveyard and gains 2 life, and they put Dread Return and Lolith Giant into their graveyard. That's not good. We'll talk about why in hopefully not soon. While I've been doing okay, I am stuck on 2 lands and I've only been able to play my creatures because they have affinity for artifact. I cast down the Lolith Troll and I feel okay. My opponent has nothing except something scary in the graveyard, but I do still need to find a way to do 22 damage. I'm 3 mana away from casting any Garys. But I do find the next land, and then we play a Grim Bauble that can kill the 1/2 Triton, and then we make way for our creatures, except we really don't want to kill the Imp, because if the Imp dies, he can start dredging it and filling up his graveyard with even more stuff, and that would be bad. The way Lolith Troll works is that it deals 1 damage for each creature in your graveyard when it enters, and Dread Return can bring it back from the graveyard by playing a flashback cost, and the flashback cost is sacrificing 3 creatures. So if my opponent can start filling their graveyard up with creatures and get 2 more creatures into play, they can kill me. I play a Chittering Rat, and my opponent still only has 1 card in hand, which they then put on top of their deck. I still can't really attack because the Stinkweed can block, and if it blocks, it dies, and if it dies, my opponent can start filling their graveyard up. So I'm stuck in this weird situation where I need to find a way to kill them fast without killing the 1 blocker they have to enable them. My opponent played an Awe to the Bone, which gains 2 life for each creature in their graveyard, which is really good in a deck that puts their own cards into their graveyard. Luckily, it's still only 5 creatures, so they only gain 10 life. But if the Stinkweed Imp had been in the graveyard and they had started putting 5 and 5, it could have been a lot more life. 32 is still a lot for me to get through without killing the blockers. I'm gonna need a lot of Garys to win this. Archon Harvest is a 4 mana sorcery that makes 2 1/1 squirrels. It can also be cast from the graveyard for 2 mana and paying 3 life. Now you see how the opponent can just generate the 3 creatures they need from the graveyard to cast that Dread Return. My opponent sacrifices the Stinkweed Imp and 2 squirrels to cast Dread Return, and then bring back the Lolith Giant. This allows them to deal 1 damage per creature in their... No, wait, actually, stop. They brought back a Generous End. It makes sense. The Lolith Giant, they don't have enough creatures in their graveyard to actually kill me with it yet, so there's no reason to bring it back when they only have one. And the Generous End can both give you life, and it can also block my flyers. However, unlike Stinkwood Imp, I really like putting Generous End into the graveyard, so I do that, and then I attack for 9. My opponent's play wasn't terrible. They can still summon more creatures with the Archon Harvest because it has flashback. So they can still cast another Dredge return soon enough. Also, now they can actually dredge their Stinkweed Imp, as we see them do here. And they put 5 more cards into the graveyard. One of them a Dredge return, another one a thing that generates squirrels from the graveyard. So they already have the ability again to cast Dredge return. Bring in the Lolith Giant. This time it might do more damage even. However, the trade-off is they lost 9 life, and Gary could do around 13 damage now in a swing, so I would be at 26. They recast the Stinkweed Imp as a blocker again, and then they make another 2 squirrels by the flashback cost of an Archon Harvest. So they have 3 creatures, which they promptly sacrifice to cast the new Dredge return in their graveyard for its flashback cost, and this time they do bring back the Lolith Giant. I hope I'm saying that right. My opponent had 8 creatures in their graveyard, so it deals 8 damage to me when it enters, which isn't enough to kill me. But I don't have 5 mana yet, so I can't play a Gary to gain life back, and at 5 life another Lolith Troll will kill me. So what they do is, on their turn, after I have failed to kill them, they dredge the Stinkweed Imp, and in the cards they put into the graveyard, they see both Dredge Return and Lolith Giant, so they can just do it one more time, and then I die. Good game. It was closer than I thought. If I had gotten a Gary, I think I could have won that one. Next game. My opponent starts with both an Exhume, big creatures to put in the graveyard through cycling, and a Stinkweed Imp to eventually starting the engine. I have removal for all of it, and I have some sideboard text to exile their graveyard, so I think I stand good chances. Turn 1, I played a Blood Fountain. For their turn 1, they Swarm Cycle the Troll of Khazad-dûm. I pass without doing anything for turn 2, and they cast Exhume. But I can activate my Blood token to discard a card and draw a card. So I discard the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. So while they bring back a Troll of Khazad-dûm, I do actually get to bring back my biggest creature, which will drain them for 3 life, which isn't a lot. But if it dies, I can bring it back to my hand with the Blood Fountain later. I also think I can block the Troll with it, which is wrong, because you need 3 creatures to block the Troll, which is why I don't kill it on my turn, even though I have 2 cast downs in hand. However, I get to play a Mythic Draught and draw 1 card and lose a life, which is still good, because I'm digging for more permanents that can add to my Black Devotion, or even more Garys and lands. My opponent has to still get their Stinkweed into their graveyard to really start popping off here, but first they can attack me for 6, and if you notice, I am very eager to block with my Asphodel. I'm trying to put it into the graveyard, but I'm informed, it has to be blocked by 3 creatures, and I take 6. Which isn't great. I should know the cards. However, I do get to swing back for 2 on my turn, and we're kind of having the same strategy. We both want to slam a creature that does a ton of damage, so it's important for both of us to lower the opponent's life total. And my opponent is 15 while I'm at 16, so I think I'm ahead at this point. Also, I'm not stuck on 2 lands this game. Yay! I use my cast down to get rid of the troll, so I don't take another 6 damage. That's great. But I don't have anything to draw more cards with, or a Kumbach Witch to bring my devotion higher. So I just sit there with another cast down in hand, hoping that my opponent plays a threat so I can do something. They don't play another big threat. Instead, they play a Scrapwork Mod, which when it enters allow them to discard a card and then draw a card. Which is really interesting when you use Stinkweed Imp with it, because you discard Stinkweed Imp and then the draw you would do. Instead, you dredge the Stinkweed Imp. And since that's a replacement effect, it replaces that part of the resolving effect, so you can't respond to it in any way. Luckily, that's not super relevant here. What's relevant is they have a 2/1 in play, and their Stinkweed Imp was active for a turn. I choose to attack with my Grey Merchant of Asphodel, and they won't block with the Scrapwork Mod, so they take 2 damage. I'm not sure why they won't block. It can be cast for the graveyard, and they could make the effect again. But they probably would rather have it as a creature in play, so they can sacrifice it to flashbacking a Dredge return later. Anyways, I kill it for them with a Grim Bauble, which is an artifact that when it enters gives -2/-2 to a creature. On a later turn, you can use 3 mana and sacrifice it to surveil 2. My opponent then plays an Exhume and wants to return something from their graveyard. For a moment, I consider killing my own Grey Merchant of Asphodel so I can have it returned with that Exhume and use it again, but rather save that removal spell for the Troll of Khazad-dûm that they're bringing into play, so it doesn't beat me to death like, a sheep. My opponent then uses the Unearth ability of Scrapwork Mud to bring it back to the graveyard. At the end of turn, they'll have to exile it, and then they discard this Stingweed Imp and Dredge it, putting 5 more cards into the graveyard, and there's both a Lolith Troll and a Dread Return. So now I have to be careful that I not just suddenly lose 16 life to a Lolith Troll being brought back from the graveyard. The Mud then hit me for 2, and at the end of my opponent's turn, it's exiled, so they can't keep bringing it back. At the end of my turn, I sacrifice the Grim Bauble, paying 3 mana and tapping it, and that way I can look at the top 2 cards of my library and decide if I want to put them into the graveyard. I put both of them into the graveyard, as I want neither in my hand, as it's just more removal spells, and I have enough, because I have this cast down, and then I attack for 2, bringing my opponent to 11. This Grey Merchant of Asphodel has done more damage by attacking than by entering, which is good, sad, I don't know. My opponent plays this Stinkweed Imp, which is probably the fastest way for them to get into the graveyard now that they don't have another enabler for it, and then they pass the turn. I'm not as afraid of the Stinkweed Imp dying this turn, so I attack for 2, because I want to get the damage in, and if they do block, my Grey Merchant goes into the graveyard, and I can bring it back, either with the Exhume or with my Blood Fountain. My opponent has to be asking themselves why I'm brave enough to attack into the Stinkweed Imp now, when last game I did everything I could to never put it into their graveyard. This time I give them the option. They Swamp Cycle another Troll of Khazad-dûm, so they can find a swamp, and then they play it on their turn. My opponent tries to play Gnaw to the Bone on their turn. They have a lot of creatures in their graveyard, so they would gain 2 life for each of those creatures, which is a lot, and suddenly they could be out of range for my Gary entering the battlefield. But this is when I play my sideboard card, Crypt Incursion. It exiles all creatures in my opponent's graveyard and then gains me 3 life for each. Before it resolves, I also cast down on the Stinkweed Imp, so that's also in the graveyard. I'm at 36, and I've exiled everything from their graveyard. The Stinkweed Imp, the Lolith Giant, and suddenly their game plan is ruined, and I'm at way too much life. At this point, there's very little they can do. They would have to find Stinkweed Imp, start dredging a whole lot each turn, but that's just not possible. So, on my turn, I attack for 2, bring them down to 7. And then I play a Chittering Rat, which makes my opponent have to take a card from their hand and put on top of their library. They think about it for a bit, but it doesn't actually matter which card you put on top unless I have a way to mill you, or I guess they have ways to mill themselves, so maybe they can get rid of it. But they draw the card again, they realize they don't have anything to do, pass. This time I attack for 4, bring my opponent down to 3, and then we play it again. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, gaining way too much life, and my opponent dies. It's game 3. I don't have a removal for turn 2 if they do an Exhume again, but they don't have an Exhume. Also, I've mulliganed to 5. I've played a Witch's Cottage tapped, and they have played a Swamp and Forest Cycle for a Forest, which they play. That's not a forest, that's a Forest Swamp, which they play turn 2. Tap. On my turn, I play a Nihil Spellbomb. I really want to play the Kumbatya Witches, but Nihil Spellbomb hoses Dredge way too much. I have a lot of sideboard against Dredge, apparently, so I'm glad I did have a matchup against it. Nihil Spellbomb is a 1-mana artifact. You can tap it to exile target graveyard. If the mana you used when you tapped it is black, you also draw a card. This is a terrible explanation, but you can read the card right there. My opponent plays Stinkweed Imp. We've been here before. I choose to use the Nihil Spellbomb, exile their graveyard, because I really need to draw a card to get a land. Since, I had mulligan down to 5, I do find the land, which is great. And then I can play a Chittering Rats, forcing my opponent to put something on top. They think for a long time, and I remind them, it doesn't matter. You're gonna draw it on your turn. So they just keep the card in hand and forgo their draw. I find this funny, I don't know why. It's not really funny. Stinkweed Imp finally slaps me in the face like the goddamn warrior it is. They then play a second Stinkweed Imp, so they can still block my rat and get it into the graveyard, so I can't really attack, and this reminds me of game 1. I play a Mythic Draught, losing a life and drawing a card. And then I play a Blood Fountain, building up my devotion slowly. I am sad I had to use the Nihil Spellbomb so early, but I really needed to draw more cards with as few cards that I have in hand. It's my opponent's turn, and I'm wondering, will I be beaten down by 2 mighty Stinkweed Imps? My opponent chooses to just attack with one of them, but it's still important to deal damage at this point. Any amount of damage dealt is less damage Lolith Giant have to do. They also play the Maya Triton, which gains 2 life and mills themselves for 2. I must also say my opponent has at no point actually milled a Stinkweed Imp into their graveyard so they can dredge it. They just keep playing them down. They're much better in the graveyard than they are on the battlefield. That's to say my opponent isn't exceptionally lucky at the very least, though they do hit the Lolith Giants and Dead Red Returns fast, which might also be bad because that gives me more chances to exile them. My opponent attacks with everything. I block the Maya Triton with my rat and take 2 damage. This was a misplay. I need the rat in play to have 2 more devotions so I can scary better. My opponent then plays a Dread Return from hand for 4 mana, which really confuses me. They want to bring back a Troll of Khazad-dûm. I used a Crypt Incursion from last game to exile the graveyard. I don't have any removal spells, so a troll would be able to kill me. I gain a bunch of life and go to 21. On my turn, I cast Eviscerator's Insight, sacrificing with Mythic Draught, losing 1 life, drawing 1 card from the Mythic Draught leaving the battlefield, and 2 from the Eviscerator's Insight having sacrificed an artifact. This is a nice little combo in this deck, in a lot of black decks, honestly. And while it allows me to draw a bunch of cards, which is really good when I have Mulligan to 5, I don't really have any black devotion left. I do play a Kumbhaji Witch to make it better, but having lost the Draught and the Rat, I'm down to like 3 devotion at this point, and whatever Gary I play won't be that scary. My opponent plays a Branchwood Prowler, which mills 3 cards, and you can take a land from among them, put it into your hand. If you don't, it gets a plus counter. My opponent returns a Forest to their hand, puts another Dread Return in the graveyard, and also puts a Troll of Khazad-dûm in the graveyard. My opponent knows I've sideboarded in a ton of graveyard hide, so they use the Dread Return right away to sacrifice 3 creatures and get a big Troll of Khazad-dûm into play, hoping it can finish me. I doubt it though. I also play a lot of removal, but I don't know. I think it was the right play still. I don't envy them. They have to pick between playing around removal or playing around graveyard hate. On the other hand, they still have a graveyard and another Dread Return. So, if this doesn't work out, they're not screwed. I play a Kumbhaji Witch, bringing my devotion up to 5, and if I play a Gary now, it's at least a 7-point swing of damage. I'm considering I should cast more, but I just pass the turn to my opponent. My opponent promptly goes to attack with a troll. I can't block it, it needs 3 creatures, so I kill it with a cast down. I'm kind of wondering where I'm casting these trolls into, because there must just be a pile of trolls somewhere on the ground, you know? Actually, I'm probably throwing them into Khazad-dûm, that makes sense. My opponent plays another Gnaw to the Bone, wanting to gain 2 life for each creature in the graveyard, and you know, I let them. There's no reason to exile the graveyard, and they gain 8 life, going to 30. I don't actually remember if I had any graveyard hate in hand. But my idea is that my plan is just to attack with a lot of creatures and playing a Gary to deal the finishing damage. They can't really stop that plan in the end, and I can stop their plans of like making card disadvantage to finish me with a Lolith Grow. I'm keeping that take. I attack with both my Kumbhaji Witches, bringing my opponent to 28. I was hoping to meet like elves or creature-based deck with small creatures, so these witches could like pick off creatures, but they've just been kind of very bad small beaters. Hopefully they let some Gary finish this game. My opponent plays the Generous End. We know this one by now. And I play a Tithing Blade, killing it and attack for 2. That has been the story of this game. Opponent plays big creature. I shoot, I hit. Except when it's Lolith Giant. I play a Chittering Rat, they put their 1 card back on top of their deck. And then I play another Blood Fountain. And now Gary is starting to look, well, not scary, but scary enough that I can finally have my opponent lower than their starting health. My opponent chooses to Dredge the Stinkweed Imp, putting 5 more cards into the graveyard. If they can keep doing that, they can get the squirrel thing into their graveyard along with Dread Return and a Lolith Giant. But they will still need to have 21 creatures in their graveyard, and I've already exiled a fair amount. And I could have more exile spells, so it's a tall order. They play the Stinkweed as a blocker this time. And I can't remember if I respected the same way I did turn 1. I feel like I shouldn't, because I don't think they can actually get 21 creatures into their deck without me having some way to deal with it. Yeah, there's the Nihil Spell Bomb again. And this time I can save it and activate it in response to them trying to do something. So they need to get rid of that. And then I play Gary. This deck might not be overwhelmingly powerful or performing super well, but it feels really good to throw a Grey Merchant of Asphodel on the battlefield and just make a massive life total swing. That is fun. And sometimes I like to play to have fun like this, rather than just play the best deck and win prizes so I can play more tournaments without having to pay the entrance fee. Anyways, this is me excruciating over whether I want to attack into a Stinkweed Imp. I think I expected too much, but on the other hand, if I lose creatures, I lose Devotion, so I can't actually kill my opponent with more Garys, though I think I would still get there. And they have another Stinkweed in the graveyard anyway, so it's not like I'm enabling them. But then again, having an infinite loop of Death Touch blockers, I don't know if I want to play into that. My opponent dredges the other Stinkweed Imp, puts 5 cards into the graveyard, another Dread Return, and another spell that makes squirrels. So now they can use the Dread Return to return something from their graveyard. But I have a Nihil Spell Bomb ready. My opponent plays the Acorn Harvest, creating 2 1/1 squirrels, and they also have a Stinkweed Imp in place, so they could cast the Dread Return right now and try to bring Lolith Giant back, but I don't know how they would possibly do 31 points of damage and also play around my Nihil Spell Bomb here. But I guess they have to try and go for it. You can't just concede because your opponent has 1 card. So my opponent sacrifices all the creatures to bring back the Lolith Giant, but sacrificing the creatures is part of the cost of Dread Return, meaning the creatures go into the graveyard and then the effect to bring something back goes on this stack. So even the things being sacrificed gets exiled to this Nihil Spell Bomb as I crack it. And I draw a card. I'm very happy right now. It turns out that my sideboard against the correct decks are stronger than my deck itself at least. My opponent plays another Stinkweed Imp to block, but it doesn't matter at this point. I have another Grey Merchant of Asphodel, which will drain them down to 4. And then I could use the 2 Witches to deal 2 damage to my opponent. And then I just need to wait to untap to deal another 2 damage with the Witches. And I go to 43. Now my opponent has 1 turn to try and find something with 1 card in hand. They find a Maya Triton, which is a good start. Gain 2 life, get out of range of my Witches, and mill yourself another 2. There's another Archon Harvest to make a bunch of 1/1s. They do cast that. That costs 3 life, I think. So they should be at 3 now. Life counter. I guess I didn't edit the life counter for this because I'm going to tell you now that this is when the game ended anyway. I sacrificed one of my Grey Merchants of Asphodel to gain 5 life. Wow, I really got lazy with the life counter at the end of this match. It is also, look at the length of this video. If you've watched this far, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, send me money on Ko-Fi, whatever. I play a Refurbished Familiar. I get to draw a card off of it. I do it again. Refurbished Familiar lets you draw a card if the opponent can't discard a card to it. Then I sacrifice my other Grey Merchant of Asphodel to an Eviscerator's Insight, drawing another 2 card, and I'm basically sitting here drawing my whole library. My opponent is at 3. When I could just, tap the Witches and the Tithing Blaze, I could flip that over and that would be 3 damage. I give my opponent another turn to try and win. They draw, and then they scoop. Looking back at the footage, I'm realizing I thought this deck wasn't especially good. I don't know if it is either. There are changes I would definitely make to it if I was gonna play it again. But I've also been playing it very poorly. Like, I had ways to kill my opponent, but I gave them 2 more turns to just top deck something. And I don't like that. But let's go and watch game 4. Yeah. My opponent is playing a blue-white-black deck that we call affectionately Bouncy Ball. It's sort of a blink/bounce deck where you play things that generate value when they enter, then either return them to your hand or exile them, bring them back. I start out with a Blood Fountain, creating my Blood Clue, which adds 1 to my Devotion. I'm starting to figure out what I really need is to build a board early and answer whatever threats my opponent has. However, that's difficult when the threat is an artifact. This is Chirogenic Relic. Chirogen Relic. We saw it earlier when Tron was playing it. It draws when it enters and when it leaves the battlefield. But unlike Tron, who just ghostly flickered it at the end, this deck is different. I play my second Blood Fountain, creating another Blood Clue. This is yet another match where my Kubachi Witch doesn't actually kill anything. There's no small creatures on the battlefield, so it doesn't present a threat. My opponent hasn't played any creatures, so I discard a cast down to a Blood token to draw another card. And I have my third Blood Fountain I get to play, creating yet another Blood token. This isn't the best setup, but at least I also have a follow-up on Kubachi Witch, and that is actually 5 Devotion I'm presenting so far. So a couple of Grey Merchants of Asphodel could do a lot of damage at this point. My opponent plays a Core Skyfisher. If Chirogenic is the ball in the Bouncy Ball deck, then Core Skyfisher is the bounce part of it. When it enters, you return a permanent to your hand, and they return the Chirogen Relic, drawing another card, and then they play it again, drawing another card. I'm kind of worried because I'm thinking this deck is gonna run a lot of like counter spells and stuff, but I don't think it actually runs any, so I just need to keep building my board up. I play I'll never learn to say that. Lose a life and draw a card. And then my Devotion is all the way up to 6. So I chose to discard the cast down before because I have another removal spell, which is the Tithing Blade. And Tithing Blade stays in the battlefield with 1 black mana symbol, adding 1 to my Devotion. And then my Witch can attack for 1 since I killed their blocker. Now all I need are 2 Garys and the game is basically over, so if I have a Swarm and 2 of those, I'm happy. My opponent plays Glinthawk, which is basically Core Skyfisher for 1 mana, returns the Bouncy Ball to their hand, Chirogen Relic, and then I assume they play it again, drawing 2 cards. It's kind of crazy how this makes all of the creatures have the staple effect on them of draw 2 cards, even though you do have to keep replaying it. This is also my first opponent who knows what my game plan is. My other opponents didn't know what was coming when I played the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. So my opponent understands the importance of killing this Kubachi Witch, saving their own life total, and also lowering my Devotion count so I can't just kill them with 2 Garys over 2 turns. And I'm starting to understand something. I play the Eviscerator's Insight, sacrificing my draw, which makes me draw 3 cards. The problem is I'm not making nearly as much value as the other deck, and whenever I do that, my Devotion falls. This deck has a problem of creating Devotion, sticking it, and also generating value at the same time. I should have sacrificed the Blood tokens this time, which I do with this second Eviscerator's Insight. But I could have saved 1 of my Devotion count, which I think might be important. It's also crazy to look at these 2 cards side by side. It's basically the same card, except mine doesn't do it on leave, and I lose a life. It feels unfair. My opponent plays another Bouncy Ball, and I'm feeling the pressure of the value for sure. I don't know my opponent's deck that well yet, but they just attack with a 2/2, and I'm not that scared of it. I wonder what their actual threats are. I just had to ask, didn't I? This is Myr Enforcer. I have 4/4 for 7 mana, but it costs 1 less for each artifact you have. My opponent has a lot of artifact lands, and the Chirogenic Relics are also artifacts. So it was a 4/4 for 0 mana. Yay! Between all the sacrificing of my own permanents and my creatures dying, I'm also down to 4 Devotion now, meaning Gary will only do 6 damage if I play it. I need to play something and stick it on my board. It has a Grim Bauble, giving the Glinthawk -2/2 so it dies. I can also sacrifice it later to Surveil 2. This is great. It brings my Devotion up by 1 as well. And then I can follow up with a cast down on the big 4/4 guy, removing my opponent's threat. My opponent responds with a Reckoned Barking, sacrificing the creature I was trying to kill. They gain as much life as it cost, which is 7 even though it was free, and draw 2 cards from sacrificing it. My opponent is once again above the starting life, and this has been all day. And Gary has a really hard time because Gary can only do so much damage. And my opponent follows up with a Refurbished Familiar, making it discard a card. I am way behind on how much devotion I should have, way behind on cards in hand, and way behind on damage at this point. This is slowly, actually not that slowly, turning the wrong way for me. Next up, my opponent plays Kenku Artificer. Now, this is a weird card. It's a 1/1 for 3 mana, but when it comes into play, you can put 3+1/+1 counters on an artifact, and then that becomes a homunculus artifact creature with flying with 0 power. But it has 3 powers from the plus counters. So they turn the Kyrogen Relic into a creature now. This is really annoying if they start bouncing it, replaying it, and making their indestructible lands into 3/3 creatures. For now, just the 3/3 attacking me, that's I'm being hit by the ball. Even if they did start turning their lands into creatures, thanks to my Tithing Blade and my Mindless abilities, I can actually start killing their lands, so I don't think it's a good idea for them to do that. I play a Chittering Rat, my opponent puts one of their cards from their hand on top of their library, and I'm starting to build up a good amount of devotion again. Not only is Kyrogen Relic better than my draw artifact, it has even another ability. For 2 mana, you can sacrifice it to put a stun count on a tapped creature. There's only 1 tapped creature which is theirs, but it's up to 1, so they don't have to do it. And when they sacrifice it, they draw another card. And they don't need to keep it around because they have the other one if they start drawing bounce again. My opponent attacks for 5. I use my witches to kill the refurbished familiar. And I don't have one, so they can't kill mine back. Instead, they also shoot me in the head for 1. For a second, I consider doing the wrong play and blocking with my rats, so I lose devotion. But my opponent reminds me that his creature is flying, and I take 3 damage. It's kind of funny, because I wanted to block, but I can't. And it would have been wrong to do it, because it would make my Gary worse. I'm really good at wanting to throw away my permanents in a deck that needs them. Here I sacrifice my Grim Bauble, so I can actually surveil and control what I draw, because I am out of cards in hand. Luckily, the magic gods are kind of nice to me. I get the Grey Merchant of Asphodel off the top of my deck, and now it's just whether my opponent lets it resolve. I don't think they have any counterspells, but they do kill my Kumbachi Witches in response, so they take 2 less damage and I gain 2 less life. They do this with Thraben Charm, where one of the modes deal 2 damage for each creature you control. My witch has 3 toughness, so in response I tap it to kill the Kenku Artificer, leaving them with 1 creature, but they get to shoot 1 back and shoot my witch. And then Grey Merchant of Asphodel enters, and it does 8 points of damage and gains me 8 life, which would be good if every opponent I played against didn't gain 7 to 30 life per game. Oh my god! Thraben Charm can also exile a graveyard or destroy an enchantment. Out of those 2, exiling my graveyard can be bad for me, because I want to get my Grey Merchants back. My opponent, you'll never guess it, plays a Kyrogen Relic and draws a card, and then plays a Thoughtcast, which is a 5 mana sorcery that draws 2 cards, but it costs 1 less for each artifact you have because of Affinity for Artifacts, and I'm starting to think that Affinity for Artifacts is a little too good. And then plays another Kyrogen Relic and draws another card. My opponent has too many cards. They also exile my graveyard with a Buyuga Bug, and then slaps me in the face for 3 for good measurement. Ow. The bad news is I have no cards in hand and no way to really draw. The good news is I have 2 creatures that I can attack, and I reduce my opponent to 14. This isn't too bad. That means I can do 2 Grey Merchants of Asphodel and win, but I would really like to have a way to get mine into the graveyard and bring it back with the Blood Fountains. I'm just kind of out of cards at this point. And my opponent seems to, with these bouncy balls, have everything they need. My opponent attacks with the 3/3 flying Kyrogen Relic, and I kill it with a cast down, trying to save some life. Then they play a Glindhawk again, returning one of the Kyrogen Relics to their hands, drawing a card, and you'll never guess it. They play a Blood Fountain, a different card than the Relic. It's great. They then activate the Blood Fountain, sacrificing it to return the Myr Enforcer and the Core Skyfisher from the graveyard to their hand. And I wish I had a graveyard, but the Buyuga Bug they played removed it. They can immediately cast the Myr Enforcer for free. That's another 4/4 on the board. I should probably put Buyuga Bug in my deck. I wonder why there wasn't any on the list. Then they play a Kyrogen Relic, drawing a card, because, you know, they have to. They're legally obligated to play this card at least twice a turn. They only did it once, and it's my turn. I draw a swamp. I choose to not play it because if they have another refurbished familiar, I would rather be able to discard that swamp than allow them to draw a card. So here I'm thinking, I want to attack with this Grey Merchant of Asphodel, and I really hope they block so I can bring it back. But my opponent knows what's going on and simply takes the 2 damage rather than giving me the ability to recast it by bringing it back with the Blood Fountains. Then everything I said about the land was false, and I played. I thought I was smart, I'm not. It's probably not that important. My opponent attacks with the Mutant Force and the Glint Horde, getting at me for 6. Reducing my life to 8, and it's starting to look really bad. I mean, that has for a while, and I just keep hoping that somehow Grey Merchant of Asphodel will save me. But it's probably too late. My opponent plays another Core Skyfisher, returning a bouncy ball, drawing a card, playing the bouncy... That's not the bouncy. That's Black Mage's Rod! And now I know how this game wins. Black Mage's Rod is an equipment you can play for 2 mana. When it comes into play, it creates a hero, equips itself to that hero. And it says equipped creature gets +1/+0, and whenever you play a non-creature spell, the creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. My opponent plays Kyrogen Relic, that's not a creature, so I take 1 damage from the Black Mage's Rod. Seeing how many times they've cast Kyrogen Relic, the fact that it now also deals a damage when it enters or is played worries me. For my turn, I finally draw an Eviscerator's Insight, so I can sacrifice my Grey Merchant of Asphodel and draw 2 cards. And then hopefully I can bring it back with the Blood Fountain, but I can't do it this turn and cast it, so I need something good. I don't get anything, and I crack my Blood Fountain, hoping they don't have a Throbbing Charm. The Throbbing Charm also had a mode where it could exile graveyards. There you see it is, and I cannot get my Gary back. I also take 1 damage because that was a spell, and we know how Black Roger's Mage thing works. Yes. Then they play Cast Down on my Witch, and I take yet another damage from the Black Mage's Rod, and I'm starting to feel how people felt when I played my Mono Red deck. I realize this is still my turn, and once I give the turn to my opponent, they'll be able to bounce the Rod. They even sacrifice it here, you see? So I concede knowing I am dead at this point. For game 2, I forgot to ask to show the hands to the camera, so I actually don't know what the starting hands are, but I play a tapped land, and we can see where it goes from there. My opponent also plays a tapped land, and I cast my Kumbachi, which is already making my devotion better. My opponent plays a tapped land, and I play... You'll never guess it. Another Kumbachi Witches. That's 4 devotion on turn. That's 5 devotion on turn 3. Because I also get a Blood Fountain in there. This seems good for me so far. And I get my Blood Token. Thank you, opponent, for having tokens for me. I need to make some. All in all, I actually want to thank all my opponents for letting me record the matches. I ask every time because I don't feel like they should be obligated to. And this is a sanctioned event. So it's really fun to get to do this with these cool people. My opponent plays a Thoughtcast. It only costs 3 because they have 2 artifact lands and they draw 2 cards. For some reason, I tap a Kumbachi Witch and I deal 1 damage to myself and my opponent deals 1 damage to me, where I could have just attacked, but I think I just forgot to attack. I'm not playing super well. My opponent in the end step has to discard a land because they have so many cards in hand, which it's a bit odd. I play a draw it, lose a life, and draw a card. My devotion already at 6, and I'm the one who have the creatures, so I attack for 2, bringing my opponent to 17. And this is looking like a good match. I've built up a big board with a lot of devotion, and I'm the aggressive one, so I could probably bring my opponent down by playing a Gary or 2. I feel like I say that every game, but it's also true every game. My opponent plays a tap land, and then plays a Muir Enforcer. I immediately kill it with a cast down because I do not like the idea of them having a blocker. My opponent flashes their hand to the camera again, and it kind of terrifies me. I think, oh my god, their hand must be so good, they want to brag about it. But apparently they just had almost all lands. And then I play one of my favorite cards of all time, Pestilence. The fact that this deck can even play this card is the reason I wanted to try this deck. Pestilence is a 4 mana enchantment. For 1 mana, that enchantment can do 1 damage to each player and each creature. At the end of turn, you have to sacrifice it if there are no creatures in play. So I pay 1 black to kill the refurbished familiar and deal 1 damage to both of us. This is also really good because it's 2 black devotion for my Gary. And even though I'm dealing myself damage, I can gain that life back by playing Gary. And at any time I can, like, boom my opponent for 5 life or clear the board. It seems like a really good card. It's just very, very slow. So I crack a blood token and I discard a land to get another card. And then I use my witch to deal 1 damage to the Glinthawk, see where they put their damage. And then after that I use the Pestilence to deal 1 damage to everything. And then the Glinthawk dies and I can get in there for 1 with my other witch afterwards. I can also at the end of my turn deal up to like 5 damage with the Pestilence, then untap all my lands, do another 5 damage. As long as I'm ahead on life, Pestilence is just a clock. Except of course if I do 5 damage, all the creatures die. So, and then Pestilence dies. My opponent having drawn way too many lands and me having had a good start and putting a Pestilence onto the battlefield uncontested realizes this isn't the match they're going to win, and they concede this match here. I can't understate how much I like Pestilence. My starting hand is good. I have creatures and draw. What more could I want? And my opponent's is really good. Oh my god. We're gonna see how this turns out. I play a Swarm and I pass the turn. I have no Blood Fountain to play. And on my turn 2, I get to play a Kumbaj Witch, which adds 2 to my devotion. And I can ping down any... Well, they have no creatures with 1 toughness. But they play a Tithing Blade and make me sacrifice my creature. And this is really bad because I need them to increase my devotion. But I have another one. I play a second Kumbaj Witch, so I think it's fine. The problem is, I'm just very, very wrong. My opponent immediately plays the Core Skyfisher, returning the Tithing Blade and playing it again, killing another Kumbaj Witch. And that means I'm at turn 4 with 0 devotion. I've played no Draughts, I've played no Fountains, and I have no Artifact land. So this Refurbished Familiar is going to cost 4 mana. And at 4 mana, it suddenly doesn't seem very good. It also only provides 1 devotion. My opponent discards a Mere Enforcer, takes the turn, and attacks for 2. I don't want to block because I would just lose my creature. Then my opponent, who has a lot of artifact lands and artifacts in play, plays their Refurbished Familiar for 1 mana, making me discard a card. I discarded Okiba Gang Shinobi, which I had really wanted to ninjutsu into play, but it won't be this tournament, sadly. I failed every time I sideboarded in to actually play it. They play another goddamn Refurbished Familiar, and I have to discard my draw spells now, and this game is looking very over. I play Misfeathic Draught, or whatever it's called, to lose a life, and hope I can start drawing into some draw spells, because I am out of cards in hand. Well, I have 1. The bigger problem is my opponent has like 6 damage on board staring me down, and I have no means of defending myself other than, blocking 1 and trading poorly. My opponent plays a Thoughtcast, the spell that gets cheaper for each artifact and draws 2 cards. And then they play a Core Skyfisher, playing that Tithing Blade again, killing my creatures, and swing in for 6. This is almost worse than when they play the Bouncing Ball and draw. Right now I'm being hosed by that 1 Tithing Blade, killing all my creatures because they have bounce creatures. And I don't think I have a way back into this game, but it's the final game, we have to go for it. I sacrifice my draw, drawing 3 cards, bringing myself down to 10 life. But now I have 3 cards in hand and 1 mana. I start out with a Blood Fountain, and I get a blood token, and I get swung at for 8 going to 2. After that, my opponent plays a free Mere Enforcer, which is another 4/4. And I know things are looking bad. I'm at 2, my opponent's at 20. They have 12 points of power on the board. I have 3 cards. They have, I don't know how many they have, but it's fine. I'm sure whatever I drew will help me. Alright, the first was cracking a blood clue to find something that helps me. I don't, there's nothing. If I knew better, I would concede. I play a Chittering Rat, removing my opponent's last card, a Witch, and a Bauble, killing 1 of the flies. And then I let my opponent do it. I pass the turn to them, they attack, and I die. Good game, good tournament. I went 1-3. There was a guy who left early who placed better in the tournament than I did, which is not a great feeling. So why did this happen? Well, one thing is the deck isn't optimized. There's definitely some cards that don't work well together, like the Kumbaj Witch and the Refurbished Familiar are just anti-synergy. And the other thing is I think it's just slightly outdated with some of its power level. But the reason I performed this badly was also I played poorly. I have to really accept that looking back at all this. There was a lot of times I could have played better, preserved my board better. But you know what? It was a good day.